You're listening to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by James. How you going, James?
I'm spooked.
He's spooked. It is a scary time of year.
Yeah.
And we're joined by Callum. How you going, Callum?
Not bad.
Alum can't be here again this week, unfortunately. But we've got a lot to talk about. It is Spooktober, and we haven't done as much Halloween content as we would have liked this month, because stuff comes up, packs, and life gets busy.
Especially you guys, like you've been busy, especially Nathan doing all the pack stuff. I went hard this year.
Someone's got to carry the load of watching all the horror
movies.
Yeah.
I mean, every Spooktober I try to watch a lot, but this year I was just like cramming them in. As many as I could.
That's good. So we've got some stuff to talk
about.
So
I've been playing lots of Persona 4 Golden on the PlayStation 5.
That's not a horror game.
Well, here's where it is, actually. It's a Japanese game, obviously.
Oh.
But it's about a world in which you can summon... would you call them yokais?
Oh, okay.
Close enough.
They're like demons, anime demons.
Yeah.
Except that the crux of the matter is that your protagonist is a guy who gets sent from a big city to a small town to live with his uncle and finish out his high school years. I think it's like 1 or 2 years in high school. And one day in that town, a serial killer starts killing people.
Okay.
But he does it by throwing them into a television set through a mechanism called the midnight channel, which is when it's raining during the night. When the TV's off, a mysterious television channel appears.
That's awesome.
And you can go into the TV. But when you go into the TV, it's full of demons. So you have to fight the demons to try and figure out who the serial killer is and to stop them.
I'll allow it. There's a Spooktober approved.
Man, so it's half like a JRPG combat game where you fight the monsters, you level up, get more powerful, find items. The other half of the game is like a sim. So it's like, strengthening the relationships you have with your friends, going to your high school classes, just slice of life stuff.
Yeah.
And I can't get enough. And there's like a whole franchise of them. So if you've heard of...
there's so many.
Like Persona 5 is like the most popular one. Persona 3 Reloaded is a really popular as well. Metaphor, the fantasy one you've seen Nathan play.
Is that part of the Persona universe?
No, same company though.
Oh, yeah.
And same company, same kind of...
vibe.
But it's not set in the same universe.
No, it's not set in the same universe,
No.
but it has some of the same things.
Similarities. But anyway, so I would say technically I have been in the Halloween spirit since that game's actually quite dark.
Yeah, okay, I'll allow it.
There are some movies that we have all watched that we'll talk about first.
Yeah.
James never got around to watching the Creep films.
Yeah.
On Netflix. These are an interesting... We've mentioned these briefly, that they're an interesting thing because they were made, or I guess in partnership with Netflix before Netflix was really making originals, as far as I'm aware, or they bought rights to it.
I don't know exactly because they're on the Australian Netflix. I don't know if they're on American Netflix.
Yeah, it's distributed by Netflix internationally.
Okay, yeah, so that makes sense because they don't have the Netflix logo made for Netflix on there, but they're constantly on there. At least here in Australia. They
are interesting and worthy of note because they're one of Netflix's first forays into actually distributing film. As far as I'm aware,
maybe. Well, the first one came out in 2014.
Yeah.
I mean, their first original movie was 2015, right, with Beast of No Nation.
Yeah, but this is obviously they didn't.
But maybe they didn't make that deal until after when the second movie was coming out. Maybe because I know the second movie, the credits say Netflix presents or whatever.
The first one has never ever left Netflix, and it's it's always been on Netflix. It's always been distributed.
Which is
by
one
Netflix
of the reasons why I never got around to watching it, because when the first one came out in 2014, so this is the 10-year anniversary, I was like, oh, I got to watch that. Then the second one came out in 2017, and I was like, oh, I got to watch them both now. And they're both short, so I was like, I'll leave them and I'll watch them together. And then I was like, every year went by, and I was like, oh, I won't watch them now. I'll watch them during October, spooky season. And years went by, and I never got around to it. And because they're on Netflix and they never left, I'm like, I felt like I kept putting it off. I'm like, I can get to it anytime. They're short.
Yeah.
And they're always available.
All of a sudden, 10 years has gone by.
Literally 10 years later... we need that SpongeBob 10 years later. Yeah. Do we have any Spooktober? I know I gave you some spooky...
we have a couple of themes.
Oh, yeah. I know I sent you a whole bunch of them, but you didn't put them all on, like the Scream and the Castle Thunder and
I mean, we have some.
Screeching Bats or something. Anyway,
yeah.
Literally 10 years later, and I finally, I think I talked about this last week or the week before. I finally got around to watching both Creep 1 and Creep 2. I really enjoyed both of them.
They're intense.
Especially because in my mind, because...
also, we say they star Mark Duplass, who plays a very convincing...
Creep.
Like,
yeah.
he comes... It's effortless.
Yeah.
Like, he's a
He's
a
compelling.
guy in a movie that you don't feel safe around.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about the movies, because I knew that they were like found footage, like horror movies, where, you know, the camera, like the cameraman, the camera person follows around Mark Duplass's character, who's like a psycho.
I think if I remember correctly, it basically the story conceit or the story synopsis for the first one is he hires a videographer to just like follow him around for a day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple.
As the day goes on,
construct.
obviously things get creepier and crazier, and this guy's like running around with his camera, like, and he's getting chased and stuff. And so in my mind, I thought, I know what the movie's going to be. But two things in the first movie is that about one, Mark Duplass and the way they write the character, not even written, it's like a lot of it was like improvised, and then they found the story through that improvisation between Mark Duplass and the director who also plays the cameraman in the first movie. They sort of improvised a lot of scenarios, and as they were improvising and showing it to their friends and whatever, it got darker just naturally. So that's something interesting, is like the movie, it sets itself apart from other like found footage horror movies, is because like I'm interested in these characters and like this crazy guy and this cameraman. It's like why they're doing this, and they're talking and they're telling stories. And they're going to different places in the woods and like around this like cabin, and it was like compelling. It wasn't just like, ooh, this is scary and jump scares and whatever. It was like, ooh, these characters are weird and interesting, and this is not something I expected. And then obviously things get a bit crazier, and then halfway through the movie, it goes in a different direction that I just didn't really expect it to.
Yeah,
and I was like, wait, hang on, what? And so. Yeah, it took me by surprise, because I thought I knew the movie I was going to watch. And yes, it did have those elements, but it also just went in a different way and was compelling for a different reason. And same with the second movie, is the second, like we were talking about, I think with Smile 2, most sequels, especially horror sequels, it's just the same movie over and over again. And so I expected Creep 2 to just be another story about another camera person following around this creepy guy, and things escalate. But I guess because Mark Duplass and the writer-director, like, the collaboration is like, they
can't really talk too much about the plot of Creep 2, because it spoils the plot of Creep 1 in a very direct way, right? Kind of.
But what I'm getting at...
really, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's a connection. But what I'm getting at is, because they are the creative people who they are, they weren't, and because assumedly the movies are pretty quick and cheap to make, like, they took it in a really interesting direction for a sequel. They didn't just go, we're going to do the same movie again, just maybe a different character, different location. It took the main, like the sort of psycho, Mark Duplass's psycho character, and they're like, oh, okay, we're going to do this now. And the camera person character is like completely different from the first movie, and the reason for the video being taken is completely different. And you know, like in the first movie, like halfway through, it's like starts to go in a even weirder direction. So,
I do like that they differentiated the sequel by making it basically like, again, he's hiring someone to video him, but now it's like a confessional kind of documentary.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to spoil anything, but it's a completely different.
I mean, yeah, it's not really not really a spoiler.
Yeah. But yeah, I liked how they didn't just do the same thing again, and he's like, this is going to be.
It's still challenging for the audience to, like, I guess, think about.
Yeah, and you're not exactly sure where
you're-
you stand. Like, 'cause even though you've seen the first movie, and you know he's a liar and a killer, you're like, okay, what's going on here? And then, you know, same with the the camera person.
Still
like,
you still manage to doubt his motivations.
Yeah.
And it keeps you guessing.
and because he does lie so much, he's very compelling. He's just like a psychopath or a sociopath, whatever,
Yeah.
who's like telling all these stories, and it's like, is this part true? What's false?
That's part of the fun.
Yeah. So both Creep 1 and 2 were really interesting. Apparently they've been working on a third movie for a while. I assume
In conjunction with the Creep tapes?
I don't know, because I assume this is just an assumption. I haven't looked into it. I assume they were looking at doing 3 and then COVID happened. But I don't know. But now in November, so just next month this year, they're releasing the Creep tapes, which is like a TV series of...
With Mark Duplass in it? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So
I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing for the Creep tapes to replace Creep 3 if there was too much they wanted to put in one movie.
Well, that's what I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Creep tapes and then Creep 3 is going to come out after and it's going to tie in together, or
Maybe we'll get like a Cobra Kai thing where there'll be like, you know,
the Creep universe.
Yeah.
Creep Legacy.
Yeah. I was thinking they should bring in his brother Jay Duplass and like do a like Creeps. The S. And it's like, now there's 2.
What stuck with me from, I can't remember if it's the first Creep or the second, or maybe both actually. He puts on that wolf mask.
Yeah. Well, that's the bit in the trailer that, you know, they show, and it's like, it might even be on some posters, and I'm like, that's the image I remember.
Yeah.
But when you watch the movie, it's not really the way
I know.
It's used.
It's just
not
iconic.
really in the same.
It's iconic to me. Like
Yeah,
in my
it's a
head,
great
I
mask.
think. And I do enjoy, without spoiling it, I did enjoy the ending of Creep 2.
Yeah.
Even though it gave me blue balls.
But I think it's interesting. It's an interesting character and world they've created, and I'd be interesting to see what they do, because most found footage movies are just bad to begin with, but then to make a million sequels, it's like...
I think also, as you said, the fact that this is also super cheap and they're not long films, like they have that creative power in their corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. They could play with the idea of like, you know, like true crime is so hot right now.
Mm.
I mean, it's been hot for years.
I mean,
but
that's the Poughkeepsie tapes.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say like they
True
could do.
crime form.
Wouldn't it be cool if there was a Creep sequel? You know, let's just say it's like someone who's obsessed with true crime trying to find out what happened, and you were.
I mean,
Well, we'll see.
podcasters being like, I know that there's a serial killer in this area.
Yeah,
I
mean, we'll see what they do with the Creep tapes.
They make their way to Duplass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. You could do a lot of interesting things with it.
Yeah, it's something we're definitely going to have to revisit on the show after we watch the Creep tapes.
Yeah, definitely. Creep tape. I put in my calendar. Creep tapes and Cobra Kai, the last season, air on the same day.
Oh no!
And I'm like, all right, we'll have to.
Do I need to take time off work? For
Yeah,
this?
we'll have to plan. We'll have to plan around it. We might not get to review them on the show straight away. We might have to wait a couple of
If
weeks.
there's too much to talk about, we can always split it up over
Yeah,
one
but
live
also
and
just
then one Zoom.
watching. You know, because you guys, we were all working.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, we got to binge both
Yeah.
of them. I don't think Creep Tapes is very long in terms of episodes.
It's like half an hour episodes.
Yeah, and Cobra Kai. I still haven't watched part 1 of the last season because I was waiting, because I was in Europe.
Good move though. Good move.
And I was waiting to do it all together. So
And then we're gonna have to wait for the movie to come out with Ralph Macchio
Oh,
and Jackie Chan.
Yeah,
Oh,
which-
so exciting.
No,
not
No.
Because it turns out that Jackie Chan also knew Miyagi. What a coincidence.
you know, we should have called this when Cobra Kai first came out, and we saw Will Smith on he's one of the producers of the
Yeah.
show, right?
Yeah.
We should have called out that he's going to be fighting
sure-
behind the scenes. We're assuming he's fighting behind
I
the
am-
scenes, being like, I want Jaden in this."
I am almost certain we talked about that at some point.
Yeah, Jaden's in the universe, mate. All
Yeah.
right, I'm the money behind this show.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
putting my son in it somehow, and he got his way right at the end.
Well,
we're
I don't think
guesstimating,
Jaden. I mean, he might have a cameo, but I don't think he's in.
No.
it. But anyway, we'll definitely be talking about that.
Actually, could you imagine that
At some
career?
point.
Imagine though, you know what? We might be being too harsh. He would turn around and be really good, and he's like,
Well, that's actually what I
Jaden
was going to
Smith's an
say.
interesting
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
He gets a lot of crap, but he's interesting.
that's his dad's fault.
yeah, mostly. Yeah. And his mum's fault.
Yeah.
His whole family.
Well, what I was going to say
But we
is
can't fault him.
the franchise itself is incredibly solid. So it's one of those things where we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We watched. All of us also watched the Spanish horror film When Evil Lurks.
Spanish language. I think it's Argentinian.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
South American question
Yeah.
mark? Yeah.
Spanish language film.
Argentina's in
Yeah.
South America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always get my countries confused.
I mean, it could have also been a German film.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's a different movie. When Evil Lurks.
I mean,
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah,
Title stays the same.
They do, yeah. Title stays the same.
I loved it.
Yeah, so When Evil Lurks, it came out a while ago, and we meant to watch it, and I think it came up on the show, and we mentioned it briefly. And it's, again, one of those things where we just got busy. We were watching and reviewing other stuff. There's so many shows and movies and games and books and stuff we mention or don't get to talk about on the show or whatever. Still haven't talked about Rebel Ridge. Anyway.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I liked it. But yeah, so we kept putting this off, and I was like, this year I was like, all right, Spooktober, I'm watching it. You guys, let's watch it. And I'm really glad we did. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't watch it when it came out.
Oh man, I know.
But it's a very good movie. Basically, without spoiling it, the premise is it seems to be set in modern day Argentina in a like a rural area.
Yeah.
In like a small town sort of.
Yeah, they can't even talk about that in the movie where they're like, look, this kind of stuff doesn't happen here. It happens in the cities.
Yeah. And so in this world they've created, which is one of the reasons the movie is so fascinating, so cool, is that there seems to be like a disease or an infection.
It's kind of post-apocalyptic in the sense that a major catastrophe happened which caused the downfall of the church. So that they say the church has fallen.
Well, the death of faith.
Like they say God is dead, the church has fallen, and then there was a contagion or wave of demonic entities in the area. And then this is not something that's shown in the film necessarily. But
this is all backstory that's not.
But then in came something called the Cobras, and they say that these are the people that taught them how to...
warrior monks.
Yeah, like warrior monks that taught them how to
See,
stem the tide of this thing. So that's where the movie puts us in, as after all of this has happened.
The way, when you said it out there like that, it sounds like it's a more fantastical... more
dramatic fantasy
style.
Yeah,
like, but if like to without spoiling it, it's like imagine just a family drama on a farm and one of the characters gets sick and they need help from a doctor. There's no... And then they mention this outside, this background of like, there's something going on.
There's this comic book. It's a comic book universe in which it's just taking place in a small town.
Yeah, but it's stylistically very restrained and quote unquote realistic. Not really, but you know what I mean. Like the way it's hard to describe, because when we say all the background of it and when we say it's about this, about that, people get in their heads like, oh, this is Constantine.
That's what I say. It sounds like we're talking about Constantine.
No, not at all. Like it's so far in the background, which is what makes it so interesting. It's a normal world.
It's like a weird shit fantasy story, but it's like focused on just like an everyday.
Yeah, but the sickness is basically demonic possession.
Yeah.
But not in a way that a lot of like other movies, horror movies do it. A lot of, English language movies where it's like, oh, they're possessed and, they act crazy. It's like it makes you sick and decay, and you can't kill the person. The person's gone. There's no, like, redeeming them.
It's a literal demon
There's
controlling them.
Yeah, you can't exorcise that demon, and you can't kill the body because that
it'll spread.
Spread the curse, basically.
Yeah, it requires a very specialized way of
so there are these
dispatching.
there are these cleaners who like work for the government who are supposed to come and dispose of these entities.
And they have
possessed
really
people.
cool looking artifacts that they use in there.
But again, not in a science fiction-y fantasy sort of way. It's just like, the doctor's coming with his doctor's bag.
Yeah, but it's a very cool kind of...
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's a very cool kind of exaggerated religious iconography like tool set.
Yeah, but not to an over-exaggerated Constantine, like he gets the little glass thing he's looking through, and he's like, I can see the demon, whatever.
What I like about it...
Not that at all.
It feels like it could be an Image comic book or like a Vertigo comic book.
Yeah, it does have...
It's not a in-your-face, full-on genre film. I mean, it has demonic possession in it. It's a horror film.
Yeah.
But it feels very Image to me, where this is the kind of thing that they would do, where it's like, it's horror, but it's like low and grounded horror.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about it is how hopeless it is, and I know that's a bit of a contradiction,
Which is funny because last week you were complaining about Smile 2. It's like,
this isn't like the reason I didn't like the hopelessness in Smile 2 was because the characters, in my opinion, there was a lack of agency.
Yeah.
Whereas there's not a lack of agency in this one.
This one, it's always they're on the move.
Yeah.
They're planning and
one of the motifs of the film, which I kind of like, is the only way to escape is to lose everything. Everything you love, you just have to leave everything behind. That's the only way. Like you escape with just your soul.
That's what I like about the sort of rules they've set up. Even though it's not all explained, like there's a couple of exposition-y scenes, but there's no real explanation to anything. But yeah, I like they've set up these rules that are kind of unique to this movie.
Yeah, 7 rules.
Yeah, where it's like they're not just zombies. They're not just demon possessed people. You can't exorcise them. You can't just kill them. It's like
you have to work within a framework.
There's the frameworks of don't touch them, can't kill them, don't hurt them, can't say their name, don't do this. And it's basically just burn all the possessions, like don't take any of their close possessions, and just basically you just have to leave. And so the movie, with that in the background, has the main character basically he's like living on a farm, kind of rural area, and someone in the town gets sick, and he basically has to get his family out.
Yeah.
And there's no real way to quote unquote fight back.
Yeah, it's just him. The whole movie is him trying to escape with his family while trying to keep his family together.
Yeah. And it gets real dark.
Yeah. What I like about the world building in this is everything adds to the characters and the tension. So when they say something, they're not just saying something just to add a couple of minutes to screen time. It's like when they're talking about something, it's directly related to what's happening on screen and how the characters are reacting to what is being said.
Yeah.
Which is what I really like.
One thing I like about the world is like people know about this sickness. They know about this possession.
Yeah, they're rotten. Yeah.
Yeah, they're rotten. But it's still something like that is like if you tell someone, they'll be like, "What are you talking about? There's no sick people." Like
that's very realistic in a frustrating kind of way when you're trying to tell people.
I like that there's this background of like, the cities aren't really safe because the sickness has spread there. So people are aware of it, but everyone's going about their normal lives. Like there's a guy walking his dog, there's a guy mowing his lawn. Yeah. Like it's a normal world. Like these people, they live on this farm, they're working the farm. It's just a normal world. But if someone does get this sickness, things like
it spirals out.
It'll spiral out of control.
There's a great part where they say something like that they've already they talk about something in the city, like they've already enacted the protocols, something like that. Yeah. I was like, that's cool. There's like a 21 days later.
All the lights go out. That's another rule. It's like don't use electric lights because they.
Yeah, like that scene in the classroom was awesome.
Oh yeah.
Without spoiling it.
Yeah. Great practical effects.
Yeah, funny practical effects at the end too. I like that. Really great. I want to see more.
Just an interesting world they created and an interesting, unique take on possession,
and
horror.
It wasn't really long either. It was like an hour 40.
And you could see,
like
what I like was you could see, even in the dark scenes, you could still see what was going on.
Yeah.
I think they did a great job of using light and shadow to heighten the tension.
I wasn't a big fan of the way the movie looked overall, just in terms of, I'm assuming it was a lower budget sort of.
Yeah.
I don't think the Argentinian film industry makes big blockbusters as it is, but this movie, it wasn't cheap or anything, but it it felt a bit digital, bit like some of the cinematography was a bit ugly. The colors were a bit, digital and that muddy yellow brown.
Yeah,
I think
it's South America, man. Leave it alone.
Oh, that's the Breaking Bad yellow tint for Mexico. Yeah.
It had a budget of a bit under 3.1 million
US.
I'm assuming US,
yeah. Well, it's not bad, but yeah, I mean, it didn't look cheap or anything. Like I said, the effects were really good. But yeah, I just wish the filmmaking and the look of the film was maybe a little bit better. I think that's for me what would have pushed it up in just put it over the edge as like one of the best horror movies. Yeah. But yeah, I do really like the world they've created. It's very bleak, and I do appreciate, and we'll talk about this with another movie on our list, that these filmmakers or the Argentinians or whatever, they're not afraid to...
There's been a couple of good Argentinian horror movies recently, hasn't there? What's another one recently? Was
I
it
don't know.
History of the Occult? Was that Argentinian?
That was, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they're not afraid. They don't shy away from violence, and they don't shy away from killing off kids. Which
Well, it's funny you
I
mention
like
that.
'cause-
That's been in the zeitgeist lately because I'm pretty sure it's the Zoomers. They're such a... I'm sorry to paint everyone with the same color brush.
Damn
but
kids!
We're getting old.
Get off my lawn!
Get off
they
my
seem to
lawn.
be very fragile when it comes to film. No sex and no violence against animals or children.
yeah. I think, but you know, as someone who's grown up, we've all grown up on like Hollywood movies, and even the most insane, violent Hollywood movies. If there's a kid, you're pretty sure they're not going to get hurt or killed. Even if they get really close to it, there's only a few like American horror movies where the kid gets killed. And when Evil Lurks, they're just like, no one is safe.
It's a grounded.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean. It's not
And it's not like schlocky in a way of like, oh, you know, we're gonna kill this kid in the most gruesome way and make it a Terrifier kind of thing. It's just like this guy's world is falling apart because this demonic contagion is going around, and no, like I said, no one is safe. You can't really. That's what I like about it. You can't even fight against it.
Yeah.
There are so many rules around what you can do around this thing.
You just got to survive.
You basically just have to run and hope that it doesn't catch up with you. So yeah, I like that it didn't pull its punches. I appreciate when movies don't do that.
My only comment is that a lot of the movie could have been made a lot smoother if people just practiced safe driving.
Yeah, that's pretty much every horror movie ever made, though.
But think, you know what? I'm not without spoiling anything. Think about some of the major scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
Just be safe for drivers.
They're car related.
Have you thought that you might be under intense pressure and completely terrified?
Well, that's...
You can still watch the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's why in the horror movies, every time someone's driving away, it's because, you know, they're scared and they're bloody and of course they're going to crash because then that raises the tension. And of course the killer gets closer and, you know...
Yeah.
But yeah, people need to buckle up.
That's it. Buckle up.
10 and 2.
10 and 2 and do 500 the speed limit.
Look both ways. Yeah. Wipe off 5.
Yeah. All right, moving on. We also all managed to watch Red Rooms.
This is another movie that came out quite a while ago. And
I've been seeing good reviews on it recently, so I thought, I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, well, I meant to watch it a while ago, but I guess now that Spooktober,
it came up again.
It came up again. And
I had a really frustrating watch at the start with this one. My subtitles didn't seem to work properly for this.
I didn't seem to have any issues.
I didn't have any issues.
So the film opens in a courtroom session.
Yeah.
And like so,
it's a French-Canadian film, so the whole movie's in French.
Yeah, because God forbid they speak English.
Yeah.
That's right. So anyway,
you always say your mother is a oh god,
yes.
I'm blanking, and your father smelled of elderberries. I spit in your general direction.
The defendant, the lawyer for the defendant saying stuff, whatever. And then, like, it'll sometimes...
I really like that it's all in, like, one long take going around the courtroom and you see all the jurors and the...
My favourite thing about this movie is just the filmmaking.
Long take, yeah. This movie looked really good.
It looked amazing.
Yeah.
And so some of the stuff that they were saying in the courtroom scene would be subtitled, and then there'd be about 15 seconds where it wouldn't be subtitled. And, like, I thought I messaged Nathan about it, and he said maybe they're just encapsulating, like, the overall... gist of what they were saying. And I thought that might be the case at first, but then he'd say something, he'd say jury or whatever, and then it just wouldn't be subtitled, and then when the subtitles came back, it'd be unrelated. Like, do you know what I mean? It'd just be like the next thing he was saying.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and I tried several different files, and it was all the same. So I don't know if it was just my movie was rough.
Yeah.
Anyway,
might have got
once I was after that first scene, it was gravy.
That's good, yeah. Because you miss a lot if you're not. Because it's a very...
but I love Hacker Man films. Yeah. And I think this is very much a Hacker Man film.
Basically, it's about a horrible murder trial, like a really messed up torture and murder of 3 young girls in, like, the Quebec area of Canada. And the killer has been caught and put on trial. and basically he was killing and torturing them and putting the videos up on like the dark web, and selling them to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
And it starts in the courtroom. They've already caught him. They're gonna try him and put him away. And the movie follows this mysterious young woman who is obsessed with the case, and shows up every morning, like sleeps at the courthouse so she can get a seat in the
it's a very high profile.
The viewing area.
The like audience viewing area, and then it's sort of an exploration. It's what's really interesting is you think it's about one thing, and then the whole middle of the movie is about her character and her.
It's
she
a
becomes
relationship
friends.
movie.
Yeah, she becomes friends with another, like a groupie of this killer who
it's people on
Francine,
people on opposing sides of this court case, essentially, right?
Yeah, but also for a long time, it's got this thing where you're not sure what side she's on.
Yeah,
she's
that's what I liked about
She's
it.
very closed off. She doesn't really seem to have any friends. She spends all her time like gambling online to make money,
man.
and
I
also
would
hacking into
Could
like.
she be our sugar mama, please?
Oh yeah,
The amount of money she makes us on her phone in that movie.
yeah. And she's also a model, I guess, because she gets both
There's
so
something to
beautiful.
do.
But
Yeah.
she also, I guess, she gets paid for like one day's work.
Yeah.
And then she can just go back and be a weird
Hacker man.
hacker
Go
man.
back and make like millions of dollars at poker.
But it's
on
this
the
really,
internet.
it's this really dark, weird movie where she's just obsessed with this trial, and she's like, she watches the trial. She's like intently watching the killer to see like how he reacts, and then she goes home and you see her like on a computer like
And she's doing her
hacking
own
into
research, yeah.
like trying, and you're for a long time you're like, is she trying to help him?
Yeah.
Is she a groupie like the other girl? Is she trying to find out like help the prosecution put him away, like, and make sure that he does it? And you're not really sure, and it's just really
that continues essentially right up until the end.
exactly.
Almost. Yeah.
And even after the end, I still had questions.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right.
It's
like,
this noirish, like, morally grey, strange. Like, she's clearly crazy, but not like
not all the way crazy.
Not all the way, like there's some sort of code. And because there's the groupie girl as well, it's like you get a different look at someone who was like fully bought into this guy's innocent, and her journey as well, which is it's a really interesting dark and weird
my one
movie.
issue with the film, and this is what I believe stopped it from getting the full 5 stars, was I think it needed more of that investigation element to it, where we see hers. So the movie starts off with some galaxy brain hacker man stuff, which I love and I hate at the same time. You know, that kind of I'll connect to the door camera, blah, that kind of stuff. I was like, yeah, whatever. But then once it gets past that, it kind of gets a little grounded in the way it operates, which I thought was really interesting.
It's not a very flashy movie. It's a very like grounded.
And I think I would like to have seen more of that play out, like her doing some investigation work on, like, tracing the blockchain addresses for Bitcoin and like that type of thing, where it's more like, looking up address. We see a little bit of her using the website Have I Been Pawned or whatever, but then they ruin it by her copying the contents of something, which like the website
That's just
doesn't.
movie. Yeah, you got to suspend your disbelief.
But I would have liked.
It's better than most movie hacking where they just slam the
I would've
keyboard.
liked-
And
I did enjoy some of the tension.
Yeah.
When she's entering some of that community.
Especially because, watching someone type their keyboard and this like things happen on a computer screen, it's hard to make that interesting. That's why a lot of Hollywood movies make, computer graphics, and it's like, oh, we're hacking in. This one's more grounded, but it's still very tense. Like great kind of music and sound design.
Yeah, there's some good paranoid kind of moments.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favorite parts of the film was when she has to try and gain access to a certain place on the net. And then she has to verify her identity, and she has to do all this. She has to jump through all these hoops, and then at the same time, she's looking around like, "Oh, am I being followed?" As she gets into that paranoid state.
Yeah. And
very well done.
There's a lot of video game, like indie video games, like about like going on deep web and investigating and finding conspiracies and serial killers chasing you, whatever. Even dark web streamer, that's a more fantastical stylized one, but like it's kind of a popular genre. And we even watched, what was that movie, Nathan, you and I watched, where it was like a Screen Life movie where she's on, like she gets stalked by the guy online, and it's like this whole dark web.
Yeah, I know what
You
you're
know
talking
what-
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it reminded
I'll
me-
find it.
That was a very different movie.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of that. It's like there's something so interesting about, the seedy underbelly of the internet
Well,
and all this
I was thinking
disgusting
about this-
stuff.
I was
How
that
long
happens.
ago did we watch that?
It was a while ago.
I was thinking about this today because like there's something so interesting of the intersection of serial killers, specifically like serial killers, and then technology.
Yeah.
Like 8mm, for example. It's like
Yeah.
the same thing where it's like they're
Well,
using technology
The
to try
Den.
The Den, yes, that's right.
to try and track a killer.
Yeah.
And the more modern interpretation is the deep web. And what I think is so compelling about the deep web and like this
Dark web.
as opposed to the deep web, which
Yeah.
is unlisted websites.
Yeah, that's different. That's less.
But either way, it's so interesting where it's like trying to track people down using technology and the internet. Because like the dark web is such a threatening idea. Even though it's perfectly legal, as they explain in the film.
Yeah.
It's like, it's an unpoliced not barren, but it's like a lawless land of
Yeah.
you don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah.
Where it's like there's an understanding that when you use the normal internet, you can't just stumble upon awful things.
Yeah.
Because there's guards in place to protect end users.
I mean, I'll say, but Twitter is also, not joking, the biggest hub for illegal material on the internet.
When
But-
you guys told me that a while ago, I was so surprised.
Yeah, but you have to know the specific string of
Hashtags.
numbers,
Yeah.
letters,
That was
symbol
so.
hashtags.
I mean, it's just
And when
crazy.
Elon-
because there's so
but-
much content on there that they just can't police it all.
They were
Yeah.
trying, and then Elon bought the company and fired
course
all
he
of the
did.
people that monitor the content.
Delete Twitter, please. We're on there for now, but don't just delete it. It's disgusting.
But yeah, it's so fascinating.
Very very cool, dark, disturbing, grounded movie.
Yeah.
Not not.
I need David Fincher to make a movie like this, Like, I'd love David Fincher to come into this arena and be like, let's do a 7, but it's like, what happens if it's more on the internet domain and they have to try
Well,
and
it's
do
hard,
cyber policing to track him
One
down.
of the reasons they make a lot of movies in general, but horror movies as well, is like the VHS, the analog horror, the sort of stuff in the past. It's because I guess the internet, makes things less, and modern forensics is, I guess it makes things less believable or less scary. But you can, if you do it effectively, you can make modern technology and the internet a really scary place.
Yeah.
You can wield it really well. So yeah, Red Rooms is a good one.
Yeah, go watch it. Look, we might go to a very quick ad break and then we'll come back with more right after this. You are back on the Tuesday review. We were going to bring this up in the beginning, but I totally forgot about it.
Yeah.
Big congratulations and all of our prayers and wishes to Matt Myrams for getting the ambitious film Resonance selected for consideration for the Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Awards for Best Indie Film.
Nice.
Whoop, whoop.
Yes, we're big fans of that
Bam,
movie
bam,
and
bam.
Matt, so hopefully he manages to score a win for Resonance the film.
But yeah, just being nominated, I'm sure, is a great way to
It's
get the
fantastic.
film out there. Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's it. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, that's what people are saying.
Everyone's
Yeah,
saying
it'll
that.
catch up. All right. Moving on now for reals. James and Callum managed to watch Coffee Table.
Yeah, so this is another movie that came out a while ago.
Bundle of laughs.
Another Spanish language. I think this one's actually Spain. Can you double
Yes,
check?
I believe so.
Yeah, because they say corazón instead of corazón. Like you can tell the Spanish accent. It's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one came out a while ago, and I remember when it came out, it was like people were going nuts over the internet. Like, this is so crazy, like this is so disgusting, whatever. And again, we were meant to watch it, kept putting it off.
It's Spanish.
Okay, yeah. And we kept putting it off. And finally, this Spooktober, I was like, this is the time, we got to watch it. Unfortunately, Nathan didn't get a chance to watch it, but Callum and I watched it. I don't even know how. Can you look up the synopsis? I don't want to spoil. I don't want to spoil anything.
I got this. So it's a drama thriller, I guess. Blackest of black comedy, I guess.
It's
Well, here's the exact.
about
Is it easier if I just read the synopsis off of Google?
yeah. Just read it, and then Callum can add if he needs to.
Jesus and Maria are a couple who have just become parents, and they decide to buy a new coffee table, a decision that will change their existence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have probably said less and a little more at the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, like they're a bit older, so especially Maria, like, it's like very hard for them. It was hard for them to conceive, and so it's very important.
So it's shocking.
Yeah, it's listed in some places as a black comedy, but to say that, I think, is so misleading that
That's what I was saying.
I don't think we should say it at all.
No.
If it is humorous, it's so dark. It's darker than any comedy you've...
You know what?
Think it's
in some ways it's darker than The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
100%. Killing of a Sacred Deer is hilarious compared to this movie.
Yeah.
Like, that movie, I can definitely tell you, like, if you call it a black comedy, okay. This movie, comedy should not be...
Look, it's funny, right? Because it's like the events
It's
that
not
happen...
funny.
The events that happen are awful.
It's just so awful.
It's miserable, right?
It's one of the most miserable movies I've ever seen.
Wow.
My Letterboxd review.
Legit.
My Letterboxd review was just, this is the devil's comfort.
Yeah,
film.
mine was just emoticons. I think it was like anguished face, laughing, anguished face, gritted teeth.
Yeah.
I think I put it in our chat. The last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Was like being in hell.
Yeah. So we can't really talk about it without.
It looks
spoiling
nice.
But yeah, actually no, I will say, similar to when Evil Lurks, I didn't really like the digital shaky cam look of the
I thought it looked
film.
great.
A lot of people were saying it looked really nice. I did not like the way it looked. I think if the filmmaking was better, it would have made this movie even better. But this is also a movie that I don't even know how to rate it. Like, I originally gave it 4 stars, and then I think
I gave it 4 or 5.
I moved it down to 3.5. I'm like, but you can't rate. It's an unrateable film.
So it's a megalopolis of
no
Spanish.
No,
horror.
not at all. No,
It's 1 and 5 at the same time.
No, it's unrateable. It's good, but also the most miserable, disgusting thing I've ever seen.
I gave it 5 stars. I didn't give it a heart. It's an incredible piece.
I wish you could give a broken heart.
It's an incredible film. I probably won't watch it again.
5 stars with a dislike.
If I watch it again, it'll be like 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's quote unquote a horror movie, but to watch it when you're watching other horror movies during Spooktober, that's like a mistake in itself. To watch it as a black comedy or as a horror movie, like, it's not that.
Yeah,
it's a very dark, miserable movie that, like when Evil Lurks, maybe it's something Spanish speakers, doesn't hold back, doesn't pull its punches.
Oh god, no.
And it's hard. It's just hard to talk about. It's hard to define. Very heavy.
I will say I do disagree with you about how the film looks. I thought the film looks great. It is digital, but like, I think that for this film it worked well. The lighting was pretty good in the film.
Yeah.
I like the start in the furniture store. I thought that was great.
That's the only part that's like bordering on funny, I guess.
There are moments that are so awful that the characters have to deal with, that also have that black humor in it, that I did laugh, but then I'm like, why am I? Then at the same time, I'm like, I shouldn't laugh. The director wants me to laugh, but he also wants me to be aware that what I'm laughing at is awful.
Even like the last line,
it's like psychological manipulation.
Even the last line of the movie, I'm like, I think this is trying to be so dark that it's funny. Almost, but I was just like blank face the whole time. I was just like,
I laughed,
dude. Dude, come on.
There's a couple of scenes I can't spoil it.
Yeah,
but there's a couple of scenes that I laughed at. That it's the look on a character's face is like dawns on them, and then it holds for that second. Then you're like, yeah, that is kind of funny. I should also mention the framing is funny.
I should also mention, because this movie came out a while ago, someone did spoil it for me online, and I've talked about this before when we were reviewing Sugar, the Apple TV Plus series, where I'm not online that much. But that day specifically, I got The Coffee Table and Sugar both spoiled for me. Oof. But nothing could prepare me for what I was actually going to see. The thing
about The Coffee Table is we could tell people what happens in the film, but that's just words.
Yeah,
because the problem with the feature of Coffee Table is that the horror is in the emotional toll it takes on you to watch events play out. It's not necessarily this happens.
It's basically
this happens,
it's a character drama.
it's just disgustingly heavy film
Yeah.
to watch.
Just miserable.
Yeah.
I guess
So-
we'll move on.
Yeah, so like watch at your own risk. Don't watch it as like a fun Halloween like movie.
Although I did
And,
laugh.
and don't watch it if you're in a dark place. And don't just maybe don't watch it, but also it's pretty good.
I did laugh.
Question mark?
I will say, without spoiling it, of course, I did laugh when that girl pops around to collect the
Oh,
So
that,
is it-
see, that's
the
another
bleach?
character. I'm like, that character, I'm like, that has to be like
Yeah.
funny because
Yeah.
like
when,
they're just
when she comes in and the
the
wife
director
is like,
is just salting the wounds.
yeah, and the wife is like, so you know that smug look on her face. This is what you've been moping about.
Yeah.
I was like, oh god.
Yeah,
So
it's just
I feel like this is one I need to watch with Alum. From what you boys are saying.
yeah, but we shouldn't. Because the thing with Alan
Don't-
is we hype it up to
Yeah,
him
yeah,
and
yeah.
then we watch it and he's like, oh, I knew what was going to happen. We should just not say anything and be
Yeah.
like, oh, what movie we're going to watch? Oh, what's this? Okay, and just put it on and see what his face, see his face and your face too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't.
Alright.
Let's move on.
It was
Move on.
emotionally taxing.
Yeah.
It was- yeah. I'm getting tired.
I'm if we have time, we'll talk about more fun horror movies later on.
All right, moving on. Callum and James also watched In a Violent Nature.
Again, another movie that came out a while ago that we kept meaning to watch, kept putting it off. I drew the line. I was like, this is it, boys. We've got to watch it. Fortunately, me and Callum, only Callum and I could watch it. Nathan didn't have a chance. Matt Myrams, when we had him on the show a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
He really liked it.
He really liked it. And there were parts of it that I appreciated. So basically, it's like a Friday the 13th style slasher movie. However, it's told from the point of view of the killer. So imagine like Friday the 13th 3, where it's like Jason stalking his killers, but it's like all from his not point of view, but like it's all from his
You're following his
perspective.
character the
You're
whole
following
time.
him along as he walks slowly through the
Yeah.
woods, and then he comes across some camping teenagers, and he's like standing there like breathing heavily, and then he kills them, and then he keeps walking, and you don't really follow the teen characters or the campers,
The victims.
you're following him like walking back around, and they might come get up against him again, but we weren't really following them like we would in a traditional slasher movie. So the premise is very interesting, and I kept hearing about this movie, about how interesting it was. And I do agree with Matt Myrams, like the long takes of him walking through the woods. I'm like, this is kind of cool. And I do think the idea of following the perspective of a sort of faceless, voiceless, Jason Voorhees-esque killer, like slash, and following it through his perspective, that's interesting. But I don't think the movie works overall, especially because there are multiple parts where it kind of pops out of his perspective. And the last 20 minutes just completely abandons its premise and goes and follows a different character.
Yeah.
And there's a character we've never seen before who goes on a 20-minute monologue that ends the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, they should have stuck with it. They should have made an entire slasher film about a killer stalking teens, at camp or whatever. But it's just all following him around slowly. There's one kill that is one of the most creative, gruesome kills I've ever seen in a horror movie.
The yoga one?
Yes.
Yeah.
But all the other kills are pretty standard. A couple of them are like off screen almost, as if they're trying to ground the film in some sort of reality. But then this kill, so crazy over the
It's
top.
like something out of Terrifier.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, and the movie's also in 4:3, and it's well shot. I like the way it looked. And I'm like, I think it's trying to be arty and kind of
Gritty at
the same time, like grimy and schlocky at the same time. I was like, pick one.
Yeah.
Go full on arty and make this a grounded sort of serial killer movie, or make it a fun schlocky horror movie where he's killing like people in fun, gruesome ways.
It's hard to balance those tones.
Yeah. But do it from his perspective. So I don't think it worked overall. There are parts of it that I really liked. I'm not exactly sure how I felt about it. I gave it 3 stars on Letterboxd, but I'm leaning more towards 2.5.
Yeah.
But there are parts I enjoy, but overall, I just don't think it altogether works.
Look, I'm interested in deconstructing slasher movies because I think
yeah,
because it's such a rich genre, like there's so many movies in it, there's actually a lot you can do in that space. I don't think this worked for similar reasons you've already outlined.
Yeah.
The unfortunate effect of the story being from
Johnny's the killer.
Johnny's point of view is that any secondary characters that are introduced are only given minutes to set up reasons to care about them or establish their archetypes, because we don't get to spend a lot of time with them.
But
it's just
that's
like, here's party boy, here's whatever girl. Yeah, but like, Johnny has no personality in and of himself, so if they're going to have him be the driving force for the film, they need to do a better job of giving reasons to engage.
Yeah, that's why they should have really stuck to their guns and made the whole thing from his perspective.
Also, we shouldn't see anything of those people until Johnny kills them.
Or when you do see and hear them, it should be entirely from his perspective. Because there's a campfire scene, which I hated the way the camera just kept spinning, and we were... there was all this really cringy dialogue of these people who look 30 years old, but they're like camping in the woods and drinking. And I'm like, are they supposed to be younger? I don't know.
Yeah. College age, I guess.
And I'm like, if this was a more schlocky, fun, gory, zany horror movie, that dialogue wouldn't be as cringe, because you're like, oh, they're making fun of like old 80s slasher movies. But in this movie, I was like, what is it? Are they serious? Like, what is this awful dialogue? And because they're kind of removing the perspective of Johnny, he's still there, he's still around, but it's like it's not really from his perspective. It would have been much more interesting if the whole thing, like, he was just standing in the trees, looking looking at that, and you can hear the dialogue, but you can't. And there's a couple of scenes like that. And there's a couple of scenes where it's humorous because of that. But most of the time, it just takes itself dead seriously, and it's shot in this really arty way. And there's no score, so it's very quiet.
Yeah, I hated that part.
And I'm kind of like, what? Like I said, it didn't work. It should have been one or the other. You want to go arty, fine. You want to go schlocky, fine. Yeah. It was trying to do kind of both.
It needed a score.
Yeah.
The general idea that killers don't require a detailed means or motive highlighting the banality of death and murder is interesting in theory, but it suffers from the perspective shift, as slasher villains don't generally have charisma or staying power in and of themselves, especially considering Johnny is just a reskinned version of Jason from the Friday the 13th movies.
In this case...
So he doesn't have anything that makes him the next... Like, Art the Clown, for example.
Yeah.
He has a personality of sorts.
He has mime skills.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's like iconic, whereas Johnny's not really iconic in the same way.
But that's still interesting, is making a like Friday 13th style movie from Jason Voorhees' perspective, even if he is a blank slate and you're just following this killer around, that's still an interesting, experiment.
Yeah.
But because the movie doesn't really...
It doesn't lean into it enough.
Yeah, it doesn't
give that idea time to fruit.
Yeah, and it doesn't stick to it the whole way through.
It's like they want to have a traditional film, and then like you
because
said,
there are many
at the same time, but they don't fully accomplish either of them.
There are many like slasher movies where it's from the killer's point of view, but it's like a more traditional film of like, instead of you're following the victims and then the killer comes in, it's like, oh, you're following the killer as he goes about his business, and those are interesting movies. This isn't really that either. It's like Jason Voorhees slowly walking through the woods, and I'm like, if they did that the whole movie, it would have been more interesting, maybe even more boring than people are finding this version, but more interesting. They should have really stuck to it.
It would have been saying something, even if people didn't like it.
And while you're doing that, you could probably come up with much more interesting ideas than what ends up being in this movie.
Yeah, and a good place to put the score is when those moving parts between action sequences.
Johnny just puts in an iPod and like just as he's walking, he just has like pop music.
Let's see, listen.
It's like Madonna. He's like
the cinematography looks nice in this film, but I found it ultimately boring because it was similar shots just again. So it kind of like, the first few times you see those walking shots, it's like, oh, that looks nice, especially with all the greenery and the trekking. Too many following shots, like either too many or not enough, depending on which direction you want to take the film in. You could have had some front-facing ones, you know what I mean? Or
true, yeah. I guess
front-facing as you're walking through an aftermath of a murder scene could be interesting.
That was cool. Yeah, we didn't get anything of that. Yeah,
the kills are okay. I mean, nothing apart from the yoga one. There's nothing particularly groundbreaking.
And that sticks out like a sore thumb because you're like, wow, this is a really crazy over the top, but nothing else in the movie is really like
there's
that.
a kill with a buzzsaw, like a wood saw.
Oh, wood chopper, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you can see the guy's arm under his shirt.
Yeah,
I was like, man,
that
like,
wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't so slow and just like,
you know, like you could tell the guy was like, I know he's not dying for real. Yeah, it's a movie, but like, man, his arm's like right there. You can see it bulging under his shirt. Come on.
Yeah, but I mean that wouldn't be so bad. It's just like you know, they could have been more creative with that scene, and
they were also afraid that they shied away from it as well. If you notice, they kept us at a distance.
Yeah. Also, like the movie's not scary. And
No.
I guess because you're following the killer, maybe that's why. But yeah, there's no real... Yeah, I just didn't really care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting movie, interesting experiment, but it didn't really work for me in the end. Yeah.
Me neither.
That's fair. Right, moving on. So I watched the new Zodiac documentary on Netflix.
Yeah.
Entitled "This Is the Zodiac Speaking."
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of Zodiac documentaries over the years.
Heaps.
He's he's a well-known case, and he's an interesting case because he's got it's like the themed serial killer. You know what I mean? It's
the
there's a
ciphers.
theme-
There's that
ciphers.
famous meme where it's like, you know, women when they get into astrology, and then it's just like regular astronomy stuff, and then it's men when they get into astrology. It's a picture of the Zodiac.
Yeah, and he's interesting because he's got the costume, he's got the ciphers. He's
like a
enigma.
real life slasher villain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was never caught, so that it's like...
The mystique of it.
Yeah.
And you know the famous David Fincher movie is based on a book.
Yeah.
By Robert Graysmith, something like
that, yeah.
And the new documentary, it features Robert Graysmith. He talks it through. So it's a good kind of, I would call it a good catch-all documentary. It counts as horror because
Yeah, I mean,
I count
serial
the Zodiac
killers
as horror. You know,
yeah.
We talked about Red Rooms.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's like, so you're talking through the entire case, but there's also a focus on the Seawaters. Now, the prime suspect in this case is Arthur Lee Allen. He's he's always been the prime suspect.
Yeah.
And what I guess, you know, we didn't know was that he was good friends with the Seawaters, and he would take the kids around and, like, you know, take them on holidays, and it was close to the family and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like their experience of the Zodiac. It's through their lens. And then as adults, learning, you know, as they were growing up that, hold on, Arthur is potentially the Zodiac killer. And then them reckoning with...
Realizing in hindsight that
that all this kind of stuff happens. So yeah, this movie is... I'll call it a movie. It's a 3-part, 45-minute documentary series on Netflix.
Yeah.
So... you can watch it all together.
Yeah.
This series focuses on, I guess, the Zodiac story through the lens of the Seawaters, who, I guess, you know, they grew up with Arthur Lee Allen, and he was like a father figure to them. And you're kind of like, it's their story and the Zodiac's in unison. So it kind of lines up events in their lives with the Zodiac murders and all of the many, many, many coincidences that line up with Arthur Lee Allen and the Zodiac. And the movie comes right up to the line of making it abundantly clear that it is Arthur Lee Allen.
Turns out he was innocent and he was just Mr. Bean in it.
Well, I mean, in the Zodiac David Fincher movie, like Jake Gyllenhaal's character he plays Robert
Graysmith.
His
name is
he's like certain it's Arthur Lee Allen, John Carroll Lynch's character in the movie. And like it makes it clear that it's like probably there's a lot of things pointing, but then at the end it says like the DNA didn't match or whatever, and he was never correctly identified.
Well, that's like something they address kind of in the documentary. Is they find some new evidence and they try to DNA test it, and it's got the whole kind of, you know, we're waiting on the results. So there might be an episode 4 later on. Because it ends on the last episode, they're like, look, our production team is waiting on the results of this testing. They gave evidence. They found the Seawaters had some evidence. They gave it to the cops and they got it DNA tested. But of course, the evidence all old.
Yeah.
One thing that's always interested me is the idea of DNA evidence. It's like we get that, well, you know, as a layperson, everything I know about DNA evidence, like I think they had a huge CSI lab where you got guys around the clock doing samples and feeding them into these big supercomputers that spit out, he totally did it.
Yeah.
But in reality, from what I understand, it's not, number one, it's actually not that effective. And it's also
it's-
more difficult than it sounds.
Yeah, it's
And-
also there's a huge backlog.
And they talk about this in this documentary series where they say that the DNA testing now is much, much, much better and
Yeah.
infinite times amount better than the DNA testing they had back in like the 80s and 90s when they were maybe doing some of this testing.
yeah,
And so,
which was so long, even long after
Yeah.
the killings had stopped.
yeah, so by then it might have been the same DNA, might have been a match by today's standards, but their testing methodology was bad.
Yeah.
Or their
Well, that's why-
techniques weren't as sophisticated.
Yeah, that's why they keep the DNA, for decades, and then people only get to test them
Yeah.
now. And then a guy who's been in prison for 40 years
Like,
is exonerated or whatever.
Well, you look at the Memphis 6, no,
Three?
right? The Memphis 3, whatever they were. They got off from genetic testing. That like they were put in prison.
Yeah.
They were put on death row.
Yeah,
One, at least Damien Eccles was, and he had to fight and use his own money to pay for the DNA testing that ultimately freed him from jail.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a charity in the US called End the Backlog, where because there's so many people waiting to get the DNA
Yeah.
test that it's just like there's so many innocent people in jail. It's crazy.
But a few interesting points that in this documentary series, Arthur Lee Allen was a primary school teacher who taught ciphers.
Yeah, there's just too many
Yeah.
coincidences.
And some other things is there were holiday trips he took the Seawaters out that the cops didn't know about that were to the exact locations of murders. And then like when they were going through this kind of stuff, with like Robert Graysmith and be like, oh, and this happened here. And then the Seawaters were like, oh yeah, we went there with Arthur. Like,
Yeah.
and then the same time Arthur came back with blood on his hand and we had to go. And I'm like, it's heavily alluded to the fact that he probably took these kids as alibis to at least some of the murders.
Yeah.
And then he would come back to the car, and then if he got stopped by the cops a few times with the kids in the back. And they were saying, how are you? I'm just taking the kids home.
That's true. If you get stopped and there's kids
Yeah.
in the back, the cops are probably going to be like, "Oh, it can't be this guy."
Yeah, no, like there's stories of the kids in the back. He would drug them,
Yeah.
so they were compliant in the back on the long drive home, whatever. It's California or wherever they were going, and the cops will be there, and he was like, "Yeah, just taking the kids home." While he's got like all kinds of shit in the boot.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just insane, all of these coincidences. And obviously, there's nothing incriminating. There's nothing
Yeah.
in terms of real evidence.
Yeah.
It's all circumstantial, but why would they lie? Like, this is also this, it feels like this documentary was only allowed to be released when the mum died. Because she
Yeah,
had that whole
I
kind of
It's always
shame
hard. It's hard to
thing.
tell with these things. It's like we'll never probably really know.
No, but like he gave a bloodied knife to one of the kids, being like, you can keep it if you want it. And this was like decades after the killings. This is like in the 80s.
Yeah.
One of the kids is like, oh, that's a cool hunting knife. He's like, sure, have it. And it was wrapped up in like foil and cloth and in like a bag in the boot of his car. Yeah.
Didn't you say he also would repeat things that the letter said?
Oh, he was obsessed with an opera. And he wrote about that opera in the Zodiac letters. And he was obsessed with it. They would listen to it in class, and he would repeat lines and letters and all that kind of stuff. It's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's too many coincidences.
Even if he didn't do it, as the Gen Z would say, red flags.
Yeah. Red
Yeah.
flags
Yeah,
everywhere.
red
Yeah.
flags,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
give a bloody knife to a kid for no reason, even
Yeah.
if you're not a serial killer.
Yeah.
It's like, calm down, dude.
Yeah, yeah. So there's too many coincidences. It is a very good watch, and you can watch it all in one night.
Yeah.
I highly suggest people watch it because it's as close as we're gonna get.
Yeah.
It's as close as we're gonna get, and it is a good story. And the Zodiac movie is now out in 4K, so go watch that too.
Is it out yet, or is it coming out
Well,
soon?
it's coming soon, but people on the internet have been getting their deliveries early.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're lucky, buy it
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Moving on.
That's a great movie, by the way, the Fincher movie.
Yeah,
I think that's his
so
last great movie.
Yeah. So
Did it get released on Blu-ray?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never see it in JB Hi-Fi.
It was. I mean, that's where I bought it years
Yeah.
ago, and it was
Do
there
we
for
not
a
have
while.
it on
But
disc?
No, we don't.
We'll have to get it.
Yeah, we don't.
probably just
I'll
wait for the 4K. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it comes out here.
Oh, we'll import
Well, you have
it.
to import it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll import it. If
There
we have to.
There are movies that are worth the extra.
Zodiac's worth it.
Yeah.
Moving on, James had the unfortunate task of watching Final Destination, the franchise.
Well, not too unfortunate because I ended up enjoying the first three, quite a bit. Not a lot. So, Final Destination, everyone everyone, even if you've never seen them, you know about them. It's like the movie where you can't escape death, and there's all these crazy,
if you're a millennial like us, that scene with on the highway with
the logs.
That's the one everyone knows
that's
about.
burned into your psyche.
Yeah, like the Rube Goldberg machine of death that is the movies of like everyone, because the first movie came out in 2000, second movie came out 2002,
something like that.
I think. And like, so, we're at around that age, even though you might not be able to watch them, you're too young, you hear about these things.
You hear about it at school.
People to that school, and you see the commercial on TV, and it's just like
you go and you check out the back at Blockbuster.
Yeah.
I love fond memories of looking at the back of VHS tapes. Yeah. Just bring me back, please.
Yeah. Oh, the second one came out 2003. Yeah. So it's like around that time, like 10 to 13 years old, whatever. And it's like you hear about these movies, and it's like, maybe you start to watch some horror movie stuff, when you can, even if your parents don't approve or whatever. It's like you sneak it in at a friend's house or whatever, the friend's older brother, whatever. So it's like I was always aware of these movies, but I never watched them. My friend Ed watched them a while ago, and he was really interested in it and was telling me about them. And, saying how obviously there's a lot of missed opportunities and they don't really live up, but he was like telling me about there's an interesting...
You remember that other film we watched a while ago from the 70s?
Soul Survivor.
Yeah.
That was 84, I think.
Oh, yeah, my mistake.
Yeah.
That's something similar thing, but handles it really well.
Yeah, and then I watched that other movie, Australian movie, The Survivor, which came out around the same time, I think. Yeah. Yeah, those are kind of the proto, where someone escapes death narrowly, like a plane crash, and then death is trying to reclaim them or whatever. And, everyone knows the Final Destination movies is like a group of teenagers, they survive a plane crash, but then death is like, I'm not going to let you go. And so one by one, it finds a way to kill them all, and they have to find a way to defeat it, quote unquote. And yeah, the first movie I enjoyed. It's one of those kind of solid teen horror movies, early 2000s.
Sean William Scott's in that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's a fun, movie with some cool effects and gruesome, gory ways that people die. Second movie, I think, probably has the most iconic disaster/death scenes. The highway scene with the logs and the pipe and whatever. And the scene with the guy with the hook, and the lady gets stuck in the elevator and gets her head chopped off. It's like that. I heard about that on the schoolyard when I was younger. Like everyone knew about that, even if they hadn't seen the movie. But yeah, first, the third one I kind of enjoyed, and I know a lot of people didn't.
Is that called 3D?
No, 4 was the 3D. Yeah, that movie's bad. But yeah, three, because so the first movie sets up that death is going to claim them all in the order they were supposed to die on the plane. Second movie is like, okay, these people survived this highway pile-up crash, and now death is going to claim them. But then eventually they realize it's not claiming them in the order they died. It's claiming like in reverse order, because they all survived based on the people who survived in the first movie who weren't supposed to survive. So I'm like, oh, this is an interesting kind of exploration of the law. Like, there's a law, there's it's not really explained, who death is, or, it's just this entity.
It's like an elemental force.
Yeah. But it's interesting. It's like, okay, there's some rules, like, the third movie just doesn't really explore the law at all, but it has some fun kills. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is the sort of protagonist, and she's great, so it was kind of just fun, just the whole Rube Goldberg machine of death. If you're like, this knocks over this, and this lights fire, and then the fire makes the heat go up, and then so the thing flaps over and it hits the thing and then it kills the guy. So like that kind of was interesting. The fourth movie, garbage. I've probably seen worse movies. I've seen worse horror movies, But it's
you'd
just
have
like
to sit down and think about it.
it's just a nothing. It's just a nothing movie. Like it adds nothing. It was called instead of Final Destination 4, it was called The Final Destination because they were like, this is the end one. Like this is the final one. But there's nothing about it that signals that it's like a big wrap up of the franchise. Like it's just a very straightforward. The teens survive. They get killed off one by one. The end. What's even worse about it is that it's in 3D, which was all the rage at the time. And every kill is just something coming out of the screen. And it's so gimmicky and sucks so bad. But what's even worse is it's got some of the worst CGI I've ever seen in any movie. Just awful. So
bottom of the barrel,
any fun, gory effects in the first 3 movies, this goes out the window in the 4th movie because you're like, well, this isn't even fun to watch anymore.
Yeah.
And then the 5th movie, first half, first 2/3, not very good, pretty boring, pretty standard, like just no real exploration of the lore. Like they're just, teens to survive and they're getting killed off, whatever. The final act maybe, or the last third maybe, and then the climax, quite interesting and solid. And they introduce a new part of the lore, and it's just like, and then there's this sort of, huge climax where you're like, whoa, I can't believe they did that. And so that kind of bumps it up a little bit. Not as good as the first 3, but it's still like interesting, where it's like, okay, watchable. And that one came out in, I think, 2011? Final Destination 5, 2011, yeah. So since then, there's been nothing. Apparently, they're going to make a new one that's supposed to come out next year. Final Destination Bloodlines, I think, which we might have mentioned on the show at some point. Yeah, so I'll be interested to see what they do. But I think we talked about this when Callum watched the movies a little while ago. And, I was talking to my friend Ed about this. It's like they introduced this idea that, if you cheat death, he's going to come for you, whatever. And then there are these quote unquote soft rules or law of how it works. And, one of the characters always has a vision of the death that saves the rest of him and his friends. And then that leads to the events of the movie and death trying to reclaim them. But they never take that far enough. Like, it's like, who gave him the vision? If there's a death force, is there a life force?
Yeah.
And in the 5th movie, there's like one throwaway line of like someone sent me that vision for a reason. It's like,
yeah,
okay, let's explore this because like I said earlier in this episode, like I said last week with Smile 2, most sequels, especially horror movie sequels, is just the same movie over and over and over.
Yeah.
And when you're making a sequel to just keep exploring the rules and the lore, it's much more interesting than just how can we kill these teens off in a creative way. And if you are just going to make a movie of how do we kill off teens in a creative way, use practical effects, really go for it.
Squibs.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you can still have fun with that. But if you want to make a really good sequel to this, explore more of the lore and, come up with some fun rules. Even it's a fantasy movie. It's not
that's one thing.
Fantasy, quote unquote.
That's the thing that frustrates me with the Final Destination franchise. But even something like When Evil Lurks and some other horror movies where it seems like there are forces of evil or forces of destruction, however you want to contextualize it.
Yeah. But
there's no opposing force. There's no one to pray to who will come and help you. It's just demons. Or it's just the forces of chaos.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but let's have a deep dive into what it means that there is no God. Do you know what I mean? It's like when Evil Lurks, they mention it. It's like the church has fallen, God is dead. Okay,
but I like that background of like you don't really delve into it, but it feels like this world.
That's what made Supernatural so interesting in the early to mid seasons, and it was God's gone.
Yeah, that was a show that's like about that, and it ran for many years. Yeah. But Final Destination, where it's primarily about the kids getting killed. But then it's more interesting if you kind of lean into like, well, who's sending them the visions to save them in the first place?
That's what I was going to say.
And is there a way to cheat death so that you can permanently get the entity off your back?
If you read between the lines, right, in this franchise, these kids are just pawns in a struggle between the forces of like whatever.
And then,
I'm not gonna say evil because the force it's an elemental thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like what, like you said, like there are mechanics at work here, and they don't even try to understand how the visions work.
And then there's Tony Todd's character who shows up in almost all the movies, and he's this mysterious undertaker who knows about the force and tells the kids, to be careful. And it's like, well, how much does he know? Who's he an agent for? Is he a neutral party? Is he death himself? Like, yeah, you don't have to go full on like he's the embodiment, he's the Grim Reaper with the scythe and the hood, and you don't have to go all that, but yeah, like play with it a bit more, and that'll make the movies more interesting. When you come up with the creative ways to kill, you can factor that in. It's like, oh, now it's killing through a disease, or now it's killing through a serial killer, or you have fun with it. So I'm not looking forward to the fifth one, the sixth one.
We'll see.
I am.
We'll see.
It's still slated to come out next year.
We'll see.
Timelines in theaters and IMAX.
Okay. Hopefully they use practical effects and not CGI garbage, because even though CGI is a lot better now than it was back then, doesn't mean a lot, because it still looks bad.
All right, we still have a little bit of time, say maybe 10 more minutes.
Okay.
We'll call it. James also had the chance to watch Mads and Azrael. Or is that two separate movies?
They're two separate movies. So first is Mads, M-A-D-S, which was a French movie, I think. Can't remember now. Yeah, French movie, which just came out. It's on Shudder at the moment. It's a really interesting take on the sort of zombie genre. So it's basically like about a club kid, like in France, like, he goes to his dealer, scores some gear, gets high, goes to a party with his girlfriend, and he's kind of, her best friend's there, and then she finds out that he's cheating on her, and they're dancing, and it's getting intense. But then, like, there's this infection outbreak, quote unquote, like kind of like 28 days later kind of thing. And so the whole movie is told in one continuous shot, like no cuts.
Nice, yep.
And so on a technical level, it's very impressive, because you follow this kid as he goes from his house to the house party, and then he's getting chased by these zombies.
I'm always interested in films like that. I'm like, how many takes did you have to do? Because everyone has to get their shit tight. I
can't confirm this, so take it with a grain of salt, but I read somewhere that it took them 5 takes, and the 5th take was the one they used for the film.
Must be. Imagine you're an actor that keeps messing it up, but you're like right at the end of the film. So I'm like,
that would suck if you got through the whole film.
I would be so upset. And then there's one dude who keeps getting it wrong right at the end. They'd be like, mate, just leave. We'll find someone off the street to do your role. Like,
but and because there is a lot of horror stuff going on. It's like just the technical aspect of like, this has to be timed perfectly because the zombies have to jump and the blood has to.
Yeah.
So it's very impressive on that level.
How much cleanup would they have to do if things go wrong in the take? Again, like it's an expensive. Yeah. It's an expensive proposition.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I will say they probably use. It's not super obvious, like especially for me who doesn't like CGI, but there is some like CGI blood and stuff. But it's very effective. I think it's a well done movie because, it's a movie taking place right as the infection is starting, so it's kind of like you're right in the middle of it. Like it's not. There's no aftermath. There's no. Yeah. It's not like a Walking Dead situation where it's like, here's how the survivors go. It's like right as it's starting.
Yeah, so it's not panic in the streets just yet. But
yeah, exactly. People are still going about their night normally, but there's starting to be weird things going on, and it starts to get more intense.
It's like that. It's like that whole thing. You at the start of every zombie apocalypse movie, you've got like the news camera being like, someone's been bitten in a supermarket.
But it follows that for like 90 minutes, all in one take. And as you go and you follow
90 minutes.
roughly, yeah. And you follow the...
There would have had to be some little hidden cuts here and there. 90 minutes.
They said it's all in one.
When I looked it up, it was a short film. I'm so like, maybe it's
no. That's different. Yeah. As far as I know, they did it all in one. I don't think there are any like fake stitches, like 1917 or whatever, where they stitch it together across long multiple takes.
Mad props.
But yeah,
mad props.
But I just like, and it follows the infection as people get bitten and like, and it's like spreading, and it's not a traditional zombie virus in like The Walking Dead or whatever, or, George Romero. It's like more kind of like 28 Days Later, like a rage virus, but also like they still have their faculties, like they can sort of speak and taunt. Like they're like, I'm going to kill you. And like they're chasing, like it's a little bit different. So that was an interesting movie. And I think it was worth noting because...
Yeah, it's doing something different.
It's a bit different. It's a French movie. It's all in one take. Technically very cool. Cool music. And like an interesting look at like at the infection as it's spreading and as it's happening. Then I watched... Azrael, which... is another movie that just came out. It's on Shudder. I don't think it's a Shudder original, but it's on Shudder at the moment.
The Tuesday review is being supported non-financially.
Oh yeah, please sponsor us, Shudder. I mean, half the movies
we're doing the work here for you.
At this point, we used to be like Netflix this, Netflix that, and now we're like Shudder this, Shudder that. I mean, especially during Spooktober, it's the place to be.
Well, that's when you get money's worth.
Shudder does a lot of heavy lifting for like indie horror.
Actually,
films.
but that's what I was gonna say. The last few years, they've actually been putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah,
they've actually been doing the work. So props to them.
And I think we talked about like they used to have a lot of originals that were like some of them were good, some of them were not so good. I think now they're getting more. More. The
more money they make, the more they can put
when
in.
Evil Lurks was on Shudder, wasn't it?
It's a Shudder original.
That's a Shudder original.
There you go.
So Inner
was
Violent Nature
Coffee
is
Table?
on.
Coffee Table, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Inner Violent Nature is a Shudder exclusive. So
Inner
is Late
Violent
Night
Nature,
with the Devil.
Yeah, a bunch of movies.
The new VHS film.
Yeah.
Skinema Stink.
Hey, The Land of Nod's coming out. Did you hear about that?
Oh, hype.
Yeah, did you hear about that?
Kyle Edward Ball, the director of
His
Skinnamarink
next film,
movie.
it's either... They're not sure he's keeping the plot on the wraps, but he publicly stated he had two ideas. A retelling of the Pied Piper story, which is unlikely considering what the title of the movie is, The Land of Nod, or a world in which two people have dreams of the same house.
It's got to be that one.
Something like that.
I'm down.
You know what? I like Skinnamarink, so give him more money and creative freedom.
He made an interesting movie. I'll like to see what he does next. But anyway, Azrael.
Sorry, James.
Azrael just came out. Stars Samara Weaving. It's set like a post-apocalyptic world after the rapture has happened.
Nice.
Where there is a group of like survivors who like an ultra-religious cult who I guess believe that speech, like the sin of speaking, has led to the rapture somehow. So they've all like taken a vow of silence, and they all have scars on their necks. So I assumed that they've
cut their vocal
made themselves like cut their vocal cords, so they literally can't speak. So the movie has no dialogue.
Awesome.
And it's basically just hits the ground running, where Samara Weaving is like being chased by these cult people, and they're trying. It seems like there's obviously no dialogue, so it's just all told as it goes. So it seems like they're trying to sacrifice her to... There seems to be these zombie creatures, but what I liked about it is they're not traditional zombies. They're like these burnt people, like they're all completely burnt, and they seem to be blind, but they can smell blood. So it's like you can kind of safely navigate them if you're being careful, but if you cut yourself, they'll like all get drawn to you and stuff.
Yeah.
And they're these creepy, like all burnt and ashy and crispy and blackened.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And then she's running away, and then the cult goes after her, and it's basically like a survival movie where she has to fight to survive, kind of like a Last of Us vibe, where there are the humans who are evil, like bad, who are chasing her, but then she has to navigate the supernatural zombie threat as well. I thought it looked really nice for presumably a lower budget movie. One thing I really liked about it too is it takes place mostly in the forest, in the woods, but even the night scenes, you can tell what's going on, which is a rarity nowadays, even with big budget movies. You can tell what's going on. Lots of cool practical effects and gore, which you don't see a lot of. Even in a lot of these movies we're talking about where it's like, oh, cool practical effects. This movie had some really impressive gore effects and just practical. A car crash that was practical that I was just like, it's so crazy now that I'm impressed by a car crash where that's all it takes is just a car going, oh, here's a pole, boom. It's like so simple, but now we've lost that. You know, Marvel films have lost that, and they're the biggest kind of action blockbusters in the world.
Doesn't help that cars cost a lot more now, I guess.
Yeah, but you can get a gutted out bomb and just crash it. Like, it's just so simple. You know, like that.
Especially in a post-apocalyptic film.
Yeah.
That's true.
But anyway, it's a very simple, stripped-down movie. A lot of people didn't like it. It hasn't got a great rating. I can understand if people found it boring or didn't like it. I just appreciated that it was technically well done.
Yeah.
And I think personally, I found it could have been a bit meatier on the bones, even without dialogue. You could definitely have stronger visual storytelling. You could definitely take things in a sort of different direction. You could explore character a lot more, even without dialogue. The movie is very bare bones. But even then, I enjoyed the experience of like her running away and, you know, fighting and whatever. And then there's creatures and whatever. And the end is really cool too. So I won't spoil it, but there are interesting things, sort of interesting supernatural kind of hints that you get and weird little things. And then at the end, it's kind of this big reveal. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, so I think again, I wanted to mention it because I think it's really interesting and worth checking out. Even if you don't like it, it's something a bit different. Samara Weaving's always good value for money and, you know, running away from killers and getting covered in blood. So, yeah.
Aren't they making a sequel to Ready or Not?
Yeah.
I believe they are, which...
Here I come.
I'm sure it'll...
Is that really what it's called?
I'm sure it'll be... I'm sure we made that joke when it came out. Yeah. I'm sure we made that joke. Like Now You See Me... Now You See Me 2 should have been called Now You Don't.
Yeah.
And Ready or Not, and the second one should be called Here I Come. But obviously, it's just going to be called
Ready or Not 2.
Ready or Not 2.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like Ready or Not that much.
It was okay.
It was fine.
Yeah,
it was fine.
If people froth it, they're like, "Oh my god, best movie!" I'm like,
should have been called LaBelle's Gambit, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's a 3-star movie.
We
2.5 stars.
I think we talked about it when it came out, and I remember like afterwards we like rewrote the movie in our heads, like just in discussing, and we're like, we could make this so much better.
It's an interesting concept that they wasted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Budget was a problem, but even then,
story
I was like,
you had so much. The idea is solid,
so interesting, yeah,
and they just wasted it.
Yeah.
All right, I reckon that's all the time we got for tonight.
Wow. You know, I looked at my Letterboxd and I have 47 movies that I watched this month.
We can potentially do another Zoom episode. We can do something at home if you want to. If there's other notable films.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I always tell people: follow us on Letterboxd because we watch so many movies and we don't always get to talk about it on the show. So if you see anything we watch, just please message us and go, please talk about this because we will make it a priority if we can, obviously permitting. Also, I don't really like doing reviews on Letterboxd. And so even when people see my logs, I'm like, it's hard to, I guess, gauge.
I don't like doing the full reviews, but I usually just leave a couple of sentences.
Yeah.
Just so that I can see it in my diary.
Depends on the film.
For me, it visually helps because then it looks better for me and I can see it rather than just...
But it's one of the reasons I just kind of log them and then I'm like, I hope we can talk about it on the show so I can talk about it more, even though I ramble and my brain's all mushy and I can't remember. But, you know, like... I like to expand upon it more and talk about it like this rather than try to boil it down into a Letterboxd
it's just a log so we can know what we watch, you know?
Even my star rate, everyone knows who listens to the show.
The star ratings change every week.
Yeah, it's like I don't like star ratings. I think they're arbitrary, but I try to rate them on Letterboxd. And even like all the movies I watched this year, I was just giving most of them 4s because I'm like, I enjoy all of these, but they're not all 4-star films.
No.
But I'm like, I don't know how else to rate them.
Yeah, stars are at that moment in time. And
but even sometimes I go back and I change them and I give them more or less, but it's still something where I'm not sure. Whereas like I watch a movie and go, wow, 4 stars, but I'm like, it's not as good as another 4-star movie.
I think also 5 stars is you're limiting it to. If it was 10 stars, then you might have a greater
But see,
idea.
I've talked about this, which is why I don't like the star rating, is because anything under 5 stars, if you're a 10-star system, it's probably not worth watching. So you might as well stop at 5, like 1 to...
Yeah,
you know?
I suppose, yeah.
Because if under 5 is not worth watching, then 1...
Yeah, it's like
on
what they
your
say with
5
the IGN video game review scale starts at 6.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's like, I think the 5 scale is better than the 10 scale, but even the 5 scale, I'm like, I wish there was...
Yeah.
I was thinking of... I think I've talked about this on the show before, coming up with my own scale. And this is why we don't give star ratings on the Tuesday review, but with Letterboxd, because it's part of the app, I just started doing it. But anyway,
I guess keep an eye on our Letterboxd, everyone. I'm Nathan B _90.
I am channeldrifter.
I am Callum Tuesday.
And if there's any movies that we didn't get a chance to talk about on Halloween over the course of this month, let us know and we can make a priority to revisit it.
What's even crazier is that we're recording this on the 29th of October, so there's still 2 more days of Spooktober. Halloween's on Thursday. This episode will probably go up on the Wednesday, and by the time people listen to it, it'll be Halloween.
Yeah.
But it's like, I still got 2 days. I want to see what else. I've got some other movies lined up, so yeah.
Let us know if there's anything you want us to revisit from our Letterboxd or just in general.
Yeah.
There's more stuff coming out all the time. Thank you for listening, everyone. We're also on the socials at Tuesday Review AU, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Newsmaster, Blue Sky, Twitter.
Delete Twitter.
And YouTube.
Yeah, make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube because we've got lots of cool interviews with lots of interesting people and we have some more lined up coming out soon.
Yes, so keep an eye on all that. It's a good time to be a cousin.
Yeah, the cousins.
We got always stuff going on in the background that we're trying to work towards.
Yeah.
So it's a good time. So keep it up to date on all the socials. And
stay spooked, everyone.
That's it. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week. Adios, cousins.